All right, so the title of this program is From Connoisseur to Sommelier, taking your cannabis knowledge to the next level with cannabis interpening. Now, interpening is actually a combination of the words interpreting and terpenes. And for those of you who know what terpenes are, great, you've got a leg up. For those of you who don't know what terpenes are, that's cool. They're essentially the chemicals responsible for scent. Put them all together and you kind of have essential oils of a plant. It's a little simplified, but when you're thinking about lavender, that's typically chock full of a certain terpene called linalool that we'll discuss later. Now, is there a need for interpening? That's something we're going to cover as well. Like, why do we need interpening, even in a fully regulated, really successful cannabis industry, like a place like Colorado or Oregon? Why is it still important to have interpening? And then we'll kind of dive into interpening, which really does look at about 12 or 15 different parts of cannabis to be able to infer what it's going to do and how it's going to treat you. But we're going to take a look at just bud structure for the purposes of today's webinar. So if anyone knows what a sommelier is, it's a trained and knowledgeable wine professional. They specialize in all aspects of wine service. They do food and wine pairing. That is kind of what this interpening program was built around. And we like to think of ourselves as cannabis sommeliers. That is the process of using our sight and our scent to gauge cannabis quality, safety, and the indica sativa ratio, right? And that way we can predict the psychotropic effects of the cannabis before we consume it. So there I am, smelling a bud, interpening it, and for later on, for some bonus points for you guys, if anyone can tell me whether that's an indica or a sativa from here, I'd be really happy about that. So becoming an interpener, a lot of people ask me about, well, like, hey, like, what can this do for you? Or, is this going to get me a job? Or, who recognizes your certificate? Where do you get the authority? And to that I say, look, this is the very beginning of the cannabis industry. Okay. The idea of a wine sommelier as an actual position and certification is not as old as the making and drinking of wine, right? So somebody along the way, somewhere, had to come up with this program. And it was obviously somebody incredibly knowledgeable about wine. And they were able to develop tests, rigorous tests, both written and practical, that would allow people to prove whether or not they knew what they were talking about when they were talking about wine. And that's really what we have done for cannabis. Now, whether or not this is the program and interpeners are where it goes, like it did with sommeliers, remains to be seen. I'm hoping you guys like this program. I'm hoping it catches on. So is the Trichome Institute, who I've licensed this program from, who are the founders of this program, who I was the director of operations for 2 years. We want that in 50 years, we want there to be interpeners all over the world, right? In bud bars and cannabis hotels and whatever. But even right now, this can lead to a lot of really, really fun opportunities. As an interpener level 3, I get to go and grade cannabis at the Dope Cup. So, a couple, 3 times a year, Dope Magazine flies me out to Colorado or Oregon or California, and I get to hang out in a house for a week in a beautiful place and get to consume, see, and smell, probably 300 of the best cannabis and cannabis products that state has to offer. So, we're always looking for more people to do this, and this is kind of a prerequisite to that. You got to kind of take level 1 and get to level 2, and eventually if you can get to level 3, which happens after working with Trichome for a while, you can start doing some really awesome stuff. So just keep that in mind. Now, all these other disciplines, right? Sommeliers, cicerones for beers, mongers for cheese, cuppers for coffee, none of them are as important as cannabis. And the reason is because none of these deal with the safety or medicinal effects of the product, right? So we are going to be able to tell whether a product is going to maybe get us agitated and create anxiety, and we're going to be able to avoid that with interpening. That's just not a part of the consumption of these other products. So Why do we need interpening? Well, my question for you is, you buy this in the store, you buy this purple dream, this indica dominant purple dream. How do you know that it's purple dream, right? Is it because it was purple Urkel crossed with blue dream? Okay, well, what if it was, purple sticky punch crossed with blueberry and they decided to name it blue dream instead, or tangerine dream, or you know what I mean? So these strain names are not super reliable. They can be in some places, and I do respect the fact that there are original strain lineages like OGs and blueberry and gorilla glue, and these things exist. But the problem is that the strain name are not accurate today. The black market, unfortunately, over decades and decades and decades, forced cannabis cultivators underground. They had to be secretive. There was not tracking and data sharing of these lineage lines. So the result is that instead of having like a family tree of cannabis plants, we have now a family universe or galaxy of cannabis plants. And that's done by a company called Phylos, and we'll check that out in a little bit. But the result is that we have thousands of distinct genetic varietals, but we can't exactly be sure like where they came from or what they exactly are. And they were brought into the cannabis industry because every legal industry had to get their plants from somewhere, and most of the people that started the first cannabis businesses were either growing or selling cannabis. So it came straight from the black market. Further complications with this problem, with the mixing up of the names and the secrecy, is cannabis morphology, counterfeiting, and the law. And you might ask, well, what's cannabis morphology? Well, cannabis is a super, super adaptable plant. It is one that can change itself from a female to a hermaphrodite if it feels like it needs to produce seeds. Growers know what I'm talking about. So if you take a clone of a plant from Southern California and then you grow it in a warehouse in northeastern United States, it's under totally different growing conditions. Now, the change might not be this drastic, but the plant will adapt and grow differently in the new environment. So even though you have something that's genetically similar or genetically identical, because you took a clone, the expression it's going to have, so its phenotype, how it's going to actually be, is going to be different. And that's just because of the growing conditions. And that's the nature versus nurture. And even though it has the same nature, it was nurtured differently. And there's no way that northeastern United States is going to be able to reproduce the same climate and outdoor growing of Southern California. So that plant will change. Additionally, counterfeiting is a huge problem. In the fashion industry, counterfeiting is a $460+ billion a year racket. And if you think that doesn't happen in the cannabis industry, you're kidding yourself, because there has to be times where a grower's having trouble selling his bud because no one's heard of the strain and it's not that good, and so he just decides to slap the label Blue Dream on it, and all of a sudden now he's selling Blue Dream and everyone wants to buy it, right? That happens all the time. I've been to grows that had 10 different kinds of plants growing, and the guy said he was going to sell it all as Blue Dream because that's what was popular. So, if somebody finds a seed from one of those and it's not actually it, and then they try and grow it and they think it is, and now you see where the strain name dilemma is furthered. So what's being done to solve this problem? Well, first of all, you can get legal protection for your genetics. Like Gorilla Glue tried to do that, I believe, get a patent on the genetic DNA stamp of what their strain is. So that way they could tell if somebody was growing their strain or not, if they had an actual license to be able to grow it, because these guys want to protect the breeding that they did. And, I understand why. That's very, very important for those growers. Some people want an open source market and these things, and essentially that's what we have. But with the way that our country works, at least, I foresee the money people involved in these large businesses wanting to get protection and get the most out of their product, and it makes sense. The other thing that's being done to solve this problem is something that I mentioned earlier, Phylos. They're a company out of Oregon, Phylos Bioscience, really cool website. What they're doing is they are getting samples of cannabis, They take that cannabis, they test it genetically, and they put that genetic dot on a map. And this map is three-dimensional, and people can see how closely related different strains they are, which strains are moms and dads, based on genetic similarities. And we're going to take a quick look at that real soon. Now, what can we do? Okay, well, if you were shopping in a place in a cannabis industry that features the cultivators. So for example, in Illinois, everything is pre-packaged at the cultivator and then taken to the dispensary pre-packaged, and people can see exactly what cultivator, you know, that lime skunk or that Durban poison is coming from. So if you're in a place like that where you can tell what cultivator it is, it doesn't matter what dispensary you're at, right? If you find that cultivator strain, you're going to be good with having the same or similar experience. Now, if you're at a different dispensary or you're at your same dispensary and you find the same strain name by a different cultivator, I wouldn't necessarily trust that. I also wouldn't trust it if they don't have the cultivators featured and you don't know if it's vertically integrated or not. So some places might only sell cannabis that they grow, which is really important thing to know. And that way you can trust on their strain names as well. The last thing, you know, that we've got for you though is to learn interpening, and then you can know for yourself. Having the skill set to see and smell what strain you're consuming and how good it is and whether or not it's safe and whether or not it has mold is really, really important. So here's that Phylos Bioscience video. I'm actually going to kind of pause that and stop sharing my screen real quick. I'm going to jump over to my other video, and we are going to play that for you instead, guys, and we'll make sure that it works really well. Okay, let's see. All right, so I'm going to see if you guys can hear this for about 10 seconds, and then I'll check back in. So if someone can type in the box whether or not you can hear this.
It's just this three-dimensional map. You can zoom around in it. You can play with it. You can search for things. And now different growers and different dispensaries have their own constellations.
Okay, could you guys hear the video okay? Okay, great, great. I'm gonna go back to playing that video for you guys now. It's about 4 minutes, so let's enjoy what the Phylos Bioscience has to say.
Some dispensaries are finally starting to send letters to their suppliers saying, if you want to have stuff in our store, you have to get it tested because we want our patients to know what they're getting. The idea was kind of that we would be able to build this huge data set and answer some really difficult questions if we could solve a market problem, if we could create a demand for consistency or meet the demand for consistency. And it's working. People are sending us tons of samples. Those samples aren't the rare, interesting ones. They're the industry samples. And so we're trying to tease apart all that mess. And the bigger the data set gets, the more we can tell people with certainty what they really have. These are just the names that everything came in with. We can see that at least 30% of the names are wrong or nonsensical, but people are already starting to log on and change the names. People send us samples of different things often, and we find out that actually they have the same thing. People are using it to settle disputes even, which I'm not sure how I feel about, but you can definitely do kind of a, you know, like a DNA paternity test and figure out, you know, if your buddy really took a cutting from you and is selling it in Washington State or not. You can figure that out. So one problem with this data inherently is that it's just complicated data. So if you zoom in on certain parts of the galaxy and you turn on all the relationship lines, you can't even see some of the names. Like, it's so dense. Like, this is the actual data. The dots are separated by genetic distance. The lines are first degree relationships, either parent-child or sibling-sibling. And there's so many varieties that it's such a tangle. And the reason for that is that there's no such thing as a strain. So people talk about seed lines. and clonal lines. And there are clonal varieties. If you have a plant that's good and you take cuttings from it, all of those cuttings will be genetically identical. That's a variety. But in normal agriculture, people have made genetically stable plants. And all our children are the same. No one's ever done that for cannabis. So when you cross a male and a female cannabis plant, the seeds that you get are unique individuals, just like all of us. They are as different from each other as you are from your siblings. So all of these dots are individuals. They're not strains. It's just one plant. It's genetically used. So every plant is its own special snowflake with its own crazy chemical diversity. So it's just a really, really complicated data problem. So here in Israel, as we learned in the last couple of days, they have this weird insistence on doing things correctly, and so they actually are doing experiments to figure out what's in the plant and how does it work. We can't do that in the United States because research is still basically illegal. So what we're doing is collecting tons and tons of data. We're comparing it with patient data and chemical data. There's this massive nationwide experiment going on, and hundreds of thousands of people are using this plant. So ultimately, we're going to be able to not just figure out what are you smoking, but we're going to be able to figure out what genes control what traits, and ultimately, we're going to be able to figure out what genes and traits are related to what patient outcomes by mining all that data. And that's it.
All right, guys. Check, check. Excellent. We are back. Let's see. Share that screen back again. Oh. Okay, guys. Get back into the presentation for you here. So, pretty cool stuff that they're talking about. I highly recommend jumping on Phylos Bioscience website and playing around with the galaxy. It's a lot of fun. But let's jump into interpening with bud structure, okay? So to understand bud structure, I want to kind of talk about some plant basics. We're going to talk about how leaf structure, which is one of the most obvious things we can see, is a result of the growing environment. And then we'll translate into how the plant structure is also a result of the growing environment. We'll talk about how nodal spacing is a result of the plant's structure, and we'll talk about how bud structure is a result of the nodal spacing. So you can see how all those things build on each other. So cannabis comes from all over the world, right? You know, we've got ruderalis, comes from way up north, kind of the redheaded stepchild of cannabis. It's an auto-flowering variety type because it comes from a place with a really crazy photo period that doesn't have a significant growing time where there's less than 12 hours of light a day to allow a plant to flower. Then you got your sativas, which are coming from much more open and arid environments, and some of your indicas, which are coming from some of the more dense jungle tropic type places. And as a result, you know, think about a plant growing in the jungle, okay? There's a canopy of trees, there's a ton of other plants around, there's not a lot of space. Obviously the plant's gonna be bushy and thick, you know, and because it's competing for light, it's gonna need to be able to do the best possible job it can at photosynthesis. And just like solar panels, you know, the more broad and wide the leaves are, the more light they can catch. So that's why indica plants, jungle type plants, are going to be, you know, more broad leafed and being able to catch more light. And then the sativa plants, the really thin leaves, open in the out and open on mountainsides, you know, things of that nature, you know, they're getting bombarded with light. So they didn't need to do as good of a job. You know, they also had some more room to stretch out, more room to grow. And as a result, you know, the nodal spacing, you can see by the plants here, you know, the sativa plants just much more open. And the buds have a lot more room to grow, while the indica plants just super duper dense and bushy. And as a result, you know, the buds are going to be bushy. And here's a close look at what that nodal structure looks like. So on the left, we'd have probably what would be our indica. And as you can see, each node, or the space where the branches are, that's the places where buds grow. Each node is another opportunity, and they're really closely packed together, so the buds are going to be tighter. Conversely, with the sativa on the right, you know, the nodal spaces are much more open, and the buds have room to stretch out and grow. And so they're a lot more light and wispy and airy than the dense, heavy indica buds. Now, to show you guys this, I've got some really great pictures of indica, indica dominant, 50-50, sativa dominant, and sativa buds. And I'm going to kind of take you through it so you can kind of see them. I'm going to go back and forth and, just checking it out. You can see how dense and how round this indica is. As we get into a little bit more of an indica dominant, you can see it while it's still really dense. You can't really see through the bud anywhere, It's kind of turning a little more conical in shape, and it's had an opportunity to reach a little more. Then you got your hybrid, definitely that classic cone shaped bud, and there's a few spaces where you can see into the stem and it's a little more open. And as we get into the sativa dominant, you can see it's even more conical, more reaching. There's more open spots. And then finally the true sativa. This is actually a Thai landrace strain, I believe, that's being grown here in Illinois. Really open, really wispy. You can just see how much air is going to be able to get through that, how light it is. So kind of run you backwards now. You got your sativa, sativa dominant, hybrid, indica dominant, and indica. And just to come forward again, indica, indica dominant, hybrid, sativa dominant, and sativa. And you can see how those buds came from different style plants. And really, guys, that is the first phase of interpening. And bud structure, and all these other factors, when you look at and you say, okay, well, where does that one factor fall on the indica sativa scale? You have to then weigh that with all the other factors, like the scents that you're smelling and where the scent perception is happening, and the pistil structure. And it's really important that you're able to understand which is more controlling, which isn't. And that's going to be something you're going to be able to learn at the class that we're offering in December. That's kind of, we go the whole 9 yards on that one. So you get to check it all out. So bud structure can be used to determine key elements of cannabis quality in addition to that indica sativa ratio. And that's really important because malformed cannabis is a sign that the bud was stressed in the growing process. And stresses can include any variations, fluctuations, or interruptions to lighting, temperature, humidity, CO2 levels, the nutrients that are being given, the soil mix, any insects that get involved, diseases, and more. And believe me when I tell you, it is not easy to keep a grow in good condition all the time. It is really hard work, and that's why only the best grows grow the best cannabis. But faulty bud structure is something we can all tell. So, on the left here, this is a bud that we grew under super stressful conditions, that when we cut it off the plant, it was one bud. And as it cured and dried, it was just so upset, and it was so stressful in that growing process that it couldn't even hold on to itself. It just literally fell apart. So if you see something like that, obviously something's wrong. On the right, not quite as bad, but you can see just like the really odd formations of buds. It's not the shape and style and color and niceness, that we want and that we appreciate. And so that's a lesser degree of faulty bud structure. But being able to tell whether a bud is, open and wispy, okay, and a true sativa versus having some faulty bud structure, to the untrained eye, could be really, really difficult. So come to class, come join us and learn the ins and outs of interpening. You're going to get what is interpening, cannabis today, the strain name dilemma. We're going to get more into that. We're also going to do, probably 20 minutes on the genetics of cannabis and whether or not we are actually buying indica and sativa plants. We'll talk all about trichomes and their components, cannabinoids, terpenes, flavonoids. We'll talk about how to observe cannabis quality, cannabis aroma, potency, and trichome density, how to store cannabis property, and we'll cover the entire interpening methodology. If you have interest in going to Colorado and taking the level 2 exam, where you have about 2 hours of hands-on learning with like 100 different jars of cannabis, and then a 10-jar examination where you see and smell the differences between indicas and sativas, and you have to see and smell the faulty bud structure and the molds and all the other problems that we teach you. This level 1 is a prerequisite for it. So you can take it in your home state of Michigan and your home state of Illinois. The exam is online. It's 35 questions. If you want to sign up, guys, 10% off code webinar 10 will get you that. 12/1 in Ypsilanti, 12/2, that's actually gonna be at 3 p.m. at the Lansing Market now, not 11 a.m. 12/3 at Green Gate Health, and the rest of our dates here in Illinois coming up in December. Seats are limited, guys. We'd love to see you. Head over to www.cannabiseducation.co/enroll. And if you're interested in sponsoring the class or hosting the class, you can contact me or the divine Miss Jamie Cooper at these email addresses. So if you want to copy those down, just let me know. And that is pretty much it for the webinar, guys. I'm going to hang out now for about half an hour. We're going to do some Q&A, so I'm going to stop doing the screen share, and I'm going to check out any questions you might have. So if you have any, guys, feel free to ask them. I'll be kind of typing away with you here, and yeah, that'll be it. Any questions, guys, on the class, on my background, on anything from the webinar? Go ahead. Okay, Cody Davis. The next level class is in what location in Michigan? Cody, thank you for asking that. Oh, I apologize. I know you went over it. Oh, no problem, Cody. So the next class in Michigan is December 1st, Friday, December 1st in Ypsilanti. That is going to be at Third Coast of Ypsilanti, and it's at 6 p.m. The one after that is in Lansing the next day, December 2nd, Saturday, December 2nd. That is going to be at 3 p.m. And Sunday, December 3rd is in Grand Rapids at Green Gate Health at 11 a.m. Pronounce Ip, not Yip. Thank you, Brian. I appreciate that. Ypsilanti. You can tell I'm not from the mitten, so thank you for letting me embarrass myself in front of only a couple of people. I appreciate that, sir. I feel like if my fly was down, you'd tell me too, and that's a good guy to have in your corner. Okay, so for someone who's already familiar to the greater extent with cannabis structure and the majority of the things you discuss here tonight, what advantage do you specifically say exists in the level 1 and level 2 class structures? Okay, well, if you're interested in going on to level 2, Brian, level 1 is a prerequisite. You kind of got to prove each step along the way, kind of like, you know, katas in karate class, right? You got to do each one. So level 1, we are going to cover the entire theoretical concept of interpening. So we're going to dive really deep into some really cool concepts about scent perception, how your body works, how to tap into that to become a better interpener. We're going to talk about the history of cannabis. And really, it's a way to prove that you know what you know. You get a little pin, and it allows you to then go on to the practical side. And the practical side is something that I would recommend, you know, testing yourself on and practicing at home. And that's what level 2 is. And basically, the exam for level 2, what you're going to want to be preparing for is there will be 10 jars of cannabis. And you'll be told the following pieces of information. You'll be told 5 of them are acceptable to consume, 5 of them are unacceptable to consume. The 5 that are unacceptable to consume, you have to tell me why it's unacceptable to consume. So if it's a mold, what kind of mold is it? If it's old, how old do you think it is? You know, if there's a bud structure problem, why do you think it happened? Then you could also, the other 5, you're going to find out, okay, one's an indica, one's indica dominant, one's 50-50, one's sativa dominant, and one's sativa. You got to identify which one is which. And this is by sight and scent alone. So we teach you how to do that theoretically in level 1. We go over how to do all of this so you can practice and do that stuff at home. Then level 2 class is a practical demonstration of that, where you can have your hands on, you know, all these different jars and all that kind of stuff, to be able to actually match in your mind a labeled jar with botrytis to what botrytis looks like and smells like. Same thing with, like, you know, 3 or 4 sativas, 3 or 4 sativa dominants, etc. So that's kind of the difference between the classes. And if you have some more questions, Brian, like that, and you want to talk, you know, more in depth, or you're kind of considering whether or not, you feel free to do it here. Feel free to shoot me an email at cannabiseducationco@gmail.com. Whatever's good for you. I'm happy to continue that conversation. All right, we got another question here from Kimberly. Kimberly says, "Hi, Jeff. I was at the Science of Cannabis Summit where you spoke. Thanks again. Decided to check out your webinar. I live here in Florida, but I'm definitely interested in trying to take this class." Kimberly, we would love to have you in class. Michigan is lovely if you can come up on the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd. If you want to come to Chicago on December 23rd, it's a Saturday, I'm actually hosting the class in a really cool art gallery in the city. So if you want to come up for that, just check out the website, cannabiseducation.co, and you can find all the details. Okay, Brian, level 2 will not be in Michigan. Okay, Brian, level 2 is not currently in Michigan or Illinois, but as soon as there's a legal adult use cannabis program, I will for sure be able to offer level 2. I'm going to be working on building a kit. Unfortunately, in order to offer level 2, it takes a lot of time to be able to actually get all of this bud, right? So I have to get cannabis with powdery mildew. I have to get cannabis with jar rot. I have to get cannabis with botrytis. I have to get male flower sites. I have to get hermaphrodites. You know, I have to get everything you can imagine. And it takes time to assemble that kit. Which I am in the process of doing, but it's not going to be ready until I'm able to totally get it together. And I appreciate that, Brian, but I'm working on it because I know that the other part of that, Brian, is also legality. If I am doing it in a place that's only medical, I can only have medical patients at the event, right? Because only medical patients can be around medical cannabis. So that's the other consideration. So as soon as we're adult use, yeah, man, I'm going to have legal cannabis. But at the same time, you know, it is awesome to get out to Colorado and take the test out there. And Brian, you know, if you are interested in anything else, like I said, man, feel free to reach out to me. Kimberly, you are welcome. Would love to have you. Let me know if you're traveling. I can help you, you know, figure out where the best place to stay would be and those kinds of things. Oh, what was the cost for level 1 again? So Brian, sorry I didn't mention that. I know you asked already. Level 1 is $200. And actually you get that webinar 10 for 10% off. So that'll make it $180. And for the $180, you get about a 3-hour lecture. There's Q&A. We also get you a 42-page full color guidebook. The presentation is awesome. It's chock full tons of photos and graphs and charts that are really helpful. You get the 42-page guidebook. You also get these 2 tools that I have available. They're on my website if you want to check them out a little more. One's called the Weed Wheel and one's called the Interpening Loop. And actually, if you give me 1 second, I've got some right here and I'd be happy to show them to you. Let's see. So this is the 42-page guidebook. If you guys can see that, it covers, you know, everything about cannabis, where it comes from, bud structure, you know, smell, all these different things that we're talking about. This is the entire program. This is kind of like the Interpreter's Handbook, right? And then for when you're on the go or you just want to practice, we've got some really cool tools. So we've got, you know, the Weed Wheel. So for example, you know, indicas, you know, you can see on the body where the high is. You can see what the bud structure is supposed to look like, how broad the leaves are supposed to be. And then you compare that to a sativa, and it's, you know, much more open bud structure, and the feelings more in your racing heart and your head. And then a really cool tool, the Interpening loop. This thing goes on forever. You open it up and you can see bud quality. This is unacceptable characteristics. You can see a little bit about some terpenes, and back to the beginning where you identify indica sativa ratio. So those are the 3 things that you get with the class. You also get 1 entrance to the 35-question online exam that you can take whenever you're ready. If you pass that, there will be a pin waiting for you at the location that you took the exam. So if you don't pass, you want to take it again, it's just like $20. You get to sign up, you take it 1 more time, it's no big deal. And if you've ever taken the class and you didn't pass, the next time I come through with classes, you can sit in on the class and come to another lecture for free. You just bring your materials back. Thomas, no problem, man. Sorry to call you out. I'm glad you came. What dispensary are you at, man? Taste Buds, is that in Michigan? Yes, 8 Mile at the Bel Air Mall. So is that Detroit? Cool. Yeah, eventually, I think we're going to have these classes specifically in Detroit as well, so you don't have to drive too far. But we'd love to see you this first weekend here. Do you offer any of those materials in bulk for utilization as teaching resources for expanding cannabis companies? I could see those being effective as teaching lessons familiar employees who are working in a retail location. Brian, that's a wonderful question. I do offer these in bulk. We sell them in a POP display, a point of purchase display. It's like a kind of a cool cardboard fold out. You can get that from the parent company, and that's from Trichome Institute. However, I also do consulting for dispensaries. So if a dispensary wanted to do like a class like this privately, I can do this class. I've also got a Cannabis 101, which is just an hour. I've got a much deeper dive. I've got a cannabis products and sales training class, and that's like about a 5-hour class on every single cannabis product. I've got flower, edibles, hash and concentrates, translinguals, subdermals, topicals, sublinguals, transdermals, and topicals, excuse me. We cover all that. I also, as soon as the regulations for Michigan come out, I will be developing a responsible vendor course, which teaches dispensary employees how to operate inside the bounds of the law. Now, I'm a licensed attorney. I went to law school in Denver, and I've developed 3 of these responsible vendor programs so far, Alaska, Colorado, and Illinois. So Michigan is going to be my next one, and as soon as those regulations come out, I will be developing that. And these are all things that I offer at really good kind of package rates for groups. And basically I'll come in, we'll do it over a day or 2, depending on how many classes you want. There may or may not be lunch involved, whatever. But we take care of the employees. Everyone gets certificates. You know, the store will get like things like a window cling, a certificate for a frame. You'll get some icons that you can use on marketing and things like that as well. So it's like a full-on program. This isn't just like a training thing, right? This is a full-on curriculum. We've got books. We've got workbooks that go along with PowerPoint presentations that you fill out as you go, so you have notes that you can take home with you. We have exams that you have to pass at a 75% rate and, you know, prove that you've paid attention, you understand the concepts we're trying to get across. So Brian, if you work at a dispensary or you own a dispensary and this is something you're interested in, again, feel free to reach out and we'll get you set up. We'll take care of you. Thomas, it is sweet. And I hope to see you, man, at one of these eventually. Anybody else with any questions? Thanks, Brian. You're welcome, man. Sounds good. Okay. Let's see. All right, and someone new joined us. We got Alan, we got Forrest in the house now. If y'all have any questions, it seems like you might have missed the presentation. Don't worry, we will be emailing out a copy to everybody. But if you have any questions, guys, on the Cannabis Sommelier program that's coming or what we're doing, I'm happy to answer any questions you have right now. So feel free. Is there a way to follow me on Twitter or Facebook? Yeah, Thomas, there is. So I'm on Facebook. I'm also on Instagram. The handle is Canneduco. That's CANNEDUCO. And I just typed it right there. That is for Facebook and Instagram. And that reminds me, thank you very much, I actually have an Instagram post I need to get ready. Got a new picture of a bud that I got to put up. Okay, what are your thoughts on the rebranding of cannabis strains? I personally have a problem with my company trying to sell anything named Cat Piss or Alaskan Thunderfuck. Brian, I totally understand. You know, that's kind of what, you know, Interpening is about, right? It's about saying, who gives a shit what the strain name is? It's about, it's what scents am I smelling? What are they going to do to me? And how am I going to feel? So, you know, while I don't think we're going to totally get rid of the concept of these strain names because, you know, cannabis growers are a little bit of a goofy bunch and, you know, they're going to want to be able to put their little stamp on it. Whatever that is, whether it's crude or not. But, you know, for example, in Illinois, there's several cultivators who basically their product line will have 3 different colored labels. And, you know, one's called like Rest, one's called Rise, and one's called Refresh. And the Rest is a blue jar and it's indica. And the Rise is a red jar and they're sativas. And the Refresh is a green jar and they're hybrids. But it still says, you know, Chem OG or Blueberry or Lime Skunk on there. And I think that there is a middle ground. I think as we see, you know, larger scale businesses get involved, we'll see things like that. Like we already are seeing things like that. Willie Nelson has it. You know, Snoop has a similar thing. So I don't personally think that we're ever going to totally get away from strain names, but I think that there are classier ways to market cannabis. And some of the best businesses are definitely already doing that. Brian, that's the company your direction is moving. Market the genetics and the effect, the region of the world, etc. Yeah, exactly. That's awesome, Brian. So it's almost like going into a wine store, right? You're like, you know, from South Africa, a really racy, you know, sativa dominant, you know, it was, you know, some people call it Durban poison, but, you know, we're not going to worry about that. This is a sativa from South America or whatever. I think that would be really cool. What company are you at, Brian? If you're in Michigan, man, I would love to maybe come by the shop or something while I'm in town in a couple weeks. We are in seed funding raise at present. Okay, cool, man. Good luck with that, dude. That is a tricky stage to be in. I wish you the best of luck. If you're doing anything along the lines of needing any help with applications or anything like that, the woman who's helping me with this program, Jamie Cooper, she writes applications and I can help out with the educational and training portions of those applications. So if that's ever something you're interested in, well, feel free to let me know. Feel free to let me know. All right, guys, I'm going to hang out for like another 10 minutes or so. So, you know, feel free to ask any more questions you might have. Otherwise, you know, you will get a copy of the presentation in, I'll reach out via email. Either way, thanks, and have a quiet bunch. Really have a quiet bunch in here. Yeah, we do have a little bit of a quiet bunch in here. It's okay though. But thanks for reaching out, Brian, and participating. I really appreciate it. Like I was saying though, guys, you will be receiving a copy of this. You'll get a copy of the coupon code and everything like that. And I would love to see you in class. We do some really fun stuff. We play with terpenes. I bring real terpenes to class. So we do smell all the different terpenes in their isolated forms. I've also got some strain specific blends, which is a lot of fun to play with as well. I got to head out. Thanks for the info. Take care, everyone. Thomas, thank you very much for coming tonight, man. I appreciate it. I hope to see you in class, man. Come on out to Ypsilanti or Lansing or something if you can make the drive. All right, everybody. It seems like that is kind of it for questions. So I'm going to go ahead and shut down the webinar. It's been a pleasure. I really appreciate you guys coming out. Thank you very, very much. Have a wonderful evening. Talk to y'all soon.